most people's minds are agitated by the situation in the country. Am I okay? I even know some people who are trying to get second nationalities. You know, and they've gone as far away as Barbados and some islands in the Caribbean to pick up their nationality, so that if things break down even more than now, they can flee. And I usually tell people that the day you decide to flee, you have to go to the airport and you have to pass through Oshodi. So I remember somebody who was going to the airport on the night that Abiola was announced to have died, and he didn't get to the airport. They took all his belongings, and it took him 3 days to get back to his house in Victoria Island at that time. I also say, because many people have invested in boats, and you know, I said, they're pirates as soon as you leave Lagos. So the answer is for us to fix Nigeria, okay? In almost every facet of our national life. We have corruption, we have impunity, immorality, inefficiency. There are so many challenges. And the issue is, and I want to talk about one of the solutions today, just one of the solutions. The issue is that there is no simple solution, nor is there any single solution. Everybody is talking about restructuring. And if we restructure and we haven't done anything else, we will only end up back where we have begun. So we have many solutions, and some of them are short-term. Some of them are things that we need to do now, right for now. Like, for instance, one of the things I believe we should do is implement a zero tolerance for malfeasance. If anybody breaks the law should have its full weight on them. And you know, today people will take billions, and when they're caught, they do what they call a plea bargain. They give the money back so that they can avoid going to jail. No, they should collect the money from them and send them to jail. Okay? These are some of the things that we should do. They're medium-term solutions, and they're long-term solutions. And long-term solutions are solutions we implement now, but it may take some time. It will take a long time before we begin to see the results. And so what I'm talking about today is a long-term solution to our problem. And when I first tell you what it is, you will say, what's the relationship? But I'm coming. The title of my sermon this morning is Restoring the Family. Restoring the family. Because at the root of our problems are people, and people come from families. Okay? Every person that is born into this world is born of a father and a mother. And God's intention is for that unit to be a family. And it is in that family that we learn how to behave, we learn our sense of values, we learn morality. It's in that family. And as children are added to that family's importance increases, because that's what God intended for the family, to be the center of his redemptive purposes in the earth. So when I say family is at the heart, not something that you will relate directly to the problems we have, but everybody has come from a family. Abacha had a family. Everyone had a family. Now, I pulled this story off the internet. I believe it's a true story, but even if it isn't true, I believe it is, it's very feasible. And this is it, and I'll just read it. In 1874, a member of the New York State Prison Board noticed that 6 members of the same family were incarcerated at the same time. The board did some research, looking back a few generations to find the original couple who initiated this tragic family legacy. They traced the family line back to an ancestor born in 1720. That's more than 100 years before. A man considered lazy and godless, with a reputation as the town troublemaker. He was an alcoholic and viewed as having low moral character. To make matters worse, he married a woman who was much like himself, and together they had 6 daughters and 2 sons. Here is what the report revealed about the approximately 1,200 descendants of this couple who were alive by 1874. 310 were homeless, 160 were prostitutes, 180 suffered from drug or alcohol abuse, 150 were criminals who spent time in prison, including 7 for murder. The report also found that the state of New York had spent $1.5 million, in a shockingly high number at the time, to care for this line of descendants, and not one of them had made a significant contribution to society. Here's a contrast. A second family study began with the famous preacher Jonathan Edwards, who was born in 1703. A deeply religious man, he lived a life of strong moral values and became a minister and a dedicated family man. He married a deeply religious woman, Sarah, who shared his values, and together they had 11 children. Eventually, Jonathan Edwards became the president of Princeton University. Here is what researchers discovered about the approximately 1,400 descendants of Jonathan and Sarah Edwards by 1874. 13 were college presidents, 65 were college professors, 100 were attorneys, 32 were state judges, 85 were authors of classic books, 66 were physicians, 80 held political office, including 3 state governors, 3 were state senators, and 1 became vice president of the United States of America. What a difference it makes in the kind of values and example that are passed down to the next generation. Strong moral values can indeed bring blessings and opportunities for generations yet to be born. It's down to family. And I just want to share, how do we get the family back to what it should be? How do we get the family back to what it should be? And my suggestion is that we, in our families, must do what we know to be right. We must do it. I just remember You know, it wasn't long ago somebody grabbed some billions of naira that was for pensioners. Okay? I couldn't do it. If I was in his office and the opportunity was there, I just couldn't do it. And it's because of family training. So here are some of the things that we should do. It is in the family that a child learns self-government. There are 5 levels of government. Self-government, the ability to discipline yourself. Self-government. Then there's family government, the ability to fit within the structure of the family, discipline yourself within the family. Then there's church government, because we're talking to Christians. If you live in a church, if you belong to a church, you must fit into the structure of that government. Then there is civil government or corporate government. You work for somebody, you must be accountable and learn to live within the structure before civil government. Then in the family you learn self-provision. Self-provision. You learn as a child your parents buy you a piggy bank. You know what a piggy bank is? They're teaching you how to provide for yourself in an age-appropriate way. So these are some of the things we learn in a family. And so here are some of the things we should do. One of the things when you're teaching people is I hear that it is tell, show, and do. Tell, show, and do. Explain to the person. I want to teach you how to change a car tire. I first of all tell you what needs to be done. How to loosen the nuts. How to jack the tire up. I tell you what needs to be done. And then I demonstrate it to you. Okay? And then I do it. And in the same way in the family, we cannot afford to simply say this is what you should do. Parents who tell their children that it is bad to smoke, yet they smoke, they're telling their children to smoke. So we have to be an example of the things that we're teaching. And the first thing is to teach our children. We need to teach our children. We need to teach them values. Thank God for my mother. She used tales. Call it tales by the fireside. She used tales to put some values across. How many people have heard the story of the tortoise and the hare? It was something that helped us know slow and steady wins the race. And I remember the story of the scorpion that wanted to cross the river. And the scorpion called, I think it was a dog, because the dog can swim. He said, "Mr. Dog, can I jump on your back and you take me across the river?" And the dog said, "Mr. Scorpion, I'm not a fool. By the time we get halfway through the river, you're going to sting me and I'll die." So the scorpion said, no, I want to go across the river. If I do that, both of us will die because I will drown in the river. So the dog said, "Okay, jump on my back." And as the dog was swimming, by the time he got halfway, the scorpion stung him. And in his dying breath, he said, "Scorpion, why did you do that?" The scorpion said, "I don't know. I don't know. It's what I do. I can't help myself." Learn. There's so many things that we can teach our children by telling them stories. But you see, the problem is we have to make time. We have to make time. Now, many of us have children that are too old for these. But if the grandchildren haven't come yet, they're coming. And we can help them make sure that they get it right. There are many things that I can teach you today that I didn't know when my children were still young. We must teach them. There are many valuable lessons to be taught, and we must exemplify what we teach. We must let them see that we are doing the things that we are requiring of them. You know, the worst things when somebody turns to a child and says, "You have no home training," they're not talking to the child. They're talking to the parents. And it's an indictment on the parents that anybody would have to say, "Your child has not been brought up." We lived in a society when they said the village brought up the child. If your child was out and somebody, an auntie or an uncle, saw them misbehave, that auntie and uncle could discipline them. But try it today. Even the parents will call you and say, "How dare you do that to my child," or say that to my child. We need to teach them. There's so many things that we can teach them. So many areas in life. Because that's what God put them in a family for. There's some creatures that from the time they're born, their mother will wean them for about 3 months and then they're on their own. If God didn't have a purpose for the family, we wouldn't remain in the family. But what has happened to the family today? And it's not just a Nigerian thing. In some parts of the world, I saw a video. I saw a man with beard and mustache, and he was lying on a bed in the labor room about to have a baby. Looking at him, this was a man. But in actual fact, he was born a woman and had changed his sex, but he couldn't change his organs. Then his wife, if you looked at her, she was a woman, very pretty woman. But in actual fact, she was born male. This is what is happening. We're confusing children. And once upon a time, you didn't talk about divorce. You didn't talk about it. But today, for many people, it is already an option before they go into the marriage. We need to teach our people. Amen? Let me move on because time is going. The second thing that I think we need to do in our families is sanction. Sanction misbehavior. I know that today, people of this generation don't think quite like my generation. We would bring out the cane, or we would use some form of physical punishment. But the modern day parents say that's not necessary. I don't care. If it works, do it. Somebody came to visit us a few years ago, and she brought her little daughter. The daughter is about 3 or 4 years old. And the daughter was getting into everything, and the mother said, "If you don't stop, I'm going to make you stand in the corner." She actually stood in the corner when it got to the point that the mom put her in the corner, and she wouldn't budge from that corner. So some children, it works. But sanction, we must be prepared to sanction our children when they misbehave. And there are many things that children do that need sanction. And you know, the Bible says that it's whom God loves that he chastens. He sanctions those he loves because he loves them. And so we must be prepared to apply sanctions when our children misbehave. And apply sanctions in an age-appropriate way. What you do to a 5-year-old will not work for a 15-year-old. I tell you, one of the things that the privileges, or one of the things that older teenagers hate the most is when you take some of their privileges from them. You're not going out with your friends. And things like that. Those are the things that, so find an age-appropriate way of sanctioning your child. And you know, what all these will do is it will raise well-adjusted citizens. Today, you know, I formed a habit. When went out, if I went out and I was returning home, I'd come along Onikoyi Road because it's the quickest way, and I would see cars almost every day, almost every single day. People are driving in the wrong direction on Onikoyi. And it is a road that has some curves and bends. It's dangerous. And I see people coming. And what I do is I take a photograph of them coming and put it on Instagram or where have you. There's only one day when the person coming seemed to be an American diplomat, and my passport was in in the embassy. So there is so much misbehavior. We have become a people that act with impunity. I was just coming into the gate one day at Parkview Gate, the Oba's Gate they call it. And this woman was just looking because she was going to go one way. So I just wound down my window. I said, "Do you know that that road is one way?" She said, "It's an emergency." We do things because we can get away with them. We mustn't let our children begin to develop that mindset. That if you can get away with it, it's okay. And a lot of the time, the parents are at fault. Take examination malpractice. Most of the time, it is the parents that cheat for their children. I interviewed a man on our TV program once who said that he formed an NGO called Examination Malpractice Marshals. And the things he said, the invigilator is the very one that once the exam has started says, "Okay, you can bring out your phones, you can do this, you can do that," and helps them. He said, if you pay the right amount of money, you can secure a private room for your child to write the exam with anything they want. They can take their computer there if they like. This is parents. So, is it a surprise that we are where we are as a nation? The third thing is love. Love. A child must grow up in a family that is filled with love. Listen. A child that grew up in a loving home, that felt loved, that felt cared for, that saw love between his or her parents, will not pick up an AK-47 and shoot an innocent person just for the hell of it. But you get a child that has been on the streets almost from birth, it not think twice about wasting lives. The child will do it because it's never known love. That's what's happening with the Al-Majaris, Boko Haram. These young children, the only time people come to them with money is when they want to buy their services, to do something illegal. So how can they ever feel or can they care for people? They'll treat them like rubbish. Love in the family. And I said time is an essential. You have to make time for our children. We have to make time. We have to create time to show them love, to teach them. You don't want your child, you don't leave your child to be taught in the school. You don't know what the teachers are teaching the child in school. And in this day and age, some children get sexually abused at school. And if a child had no relationship with you, you didn't spend time, you won't even realize what's going on. Love. And the final thing, there are many things, but the final thing I'll talk about, because time is far spent, is faith. Faith. You can give your child a Bible to read, and it won't help that much if the child has no reference points from your life of your faith. And children are generally, their character is generally formed by the time they are 10 years old. After 10, it is a reinforcement of whatever they've already learned. And up to 10, most of the time you have them at home. They haven't yet gone off to school, to boarding school and so on. And so we need to make that time early on in life. Don't say this child can't understand. Let me tell you something. Even when the child is in the womb, that child is a person in the presence of God, a spirit being, and the child's spirit is alive. If you're praying in tongues, the child can catch it. So it's important for us to communicate our faith to our children from early on. They remember God did it for mommy, God did it for daddy, God will do it for me. Many of the doubts our children have of faith are because we haven't demonstrated it to them. So yes, family is the crucible from which our nation can be changed. Listen, if you restructure, if you anything, people are calling it devolution of power, all kinds of things. If the people remain the same, if we haven't brought up people, raised generations of moral people with integrity, people of character, we will lose everything else that we do. So we must start that now. Take a look at your family when you get home. Your children maybe are already old enough, but your grandchildren can benefit from what you may not have done with your children. Take a look at the gaps in your relationship with your children. I've met too many people that want to be the best friend of their child. It's good to be friends with your child, but your child is not going to tell you everything that is going on in their life. You can't become their best friend. but you can be a friend, and you can be an influence over their lives.